Our reading this morning is an excerpt from the sermon, Jesus Pays the Price, by the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker, from the book Proverb of Ashes, which she co-authored with Rita Nakashima Brock. Here is how the theological story is told. In the beginning, human beings lived in the Garden of Eden, in perfect harmony with God. But Adam and Eve disobeyed the commandment of God. Because of their sinfulness, God had no recourse but to demand repayment for the harm they caused. We inherit their sin. The penalty for sin is death. God loves us and doesn't want to punish us, but his honor has been shamed. God is torn between love for us and the requirements of justice. To resolve this problem, he sends his only son, Jesus, into the world to pay the price we owe, to bear the punishment that all of humanity deserves. Alison of Canterbury formulated the first statement of this substitutionary atonement theology in the 12th century. In the 16th century, John Calvin developed this theology further, placing more emphasis on the wrath and punishment of God. A generation of Anselm of Canterbury wrote this theology. French theologian Peter Abelard questioned it. Who will forgive God for the sin of killing his own child? He asked. How cruel and wicked it seems that anyone should demand the blood of an innocent person as the price for anything, or that it should in any way please him that an innocent man should be slain. Still less that God should consider the death of his son so agreeable that by it he should be reconciled to the whole world. Parker continues, offense at a cruel image of God has been present throughout the centuries. In 1805, in his treatise on atonement, the American Universalist preacher Hosea Ballou said, the belief that the great Jehovah was offended with his creatures to that degree that nothing but the death of Christ or the endless misery of mankind could appease his anger is an idea that has done more injury to the Christian religion than the writings of all of its opposers for many centuries. The error has been fatal to the life and spirit of the religion of Christ in our world. All those principles which are to be dreaded by men have been believed to exist in God, and professors have been molded into the image of their deity and become more cruel. Thus ends the quote from Ballou. Parker concludes, do we really believe that God is appeased by cruelty and wants nothing more than our obedience? It becomes imperative that we ask this question when we examine how theology sanctions human cruelty. If God is imagined as a fatherly torturer, earthly parents are also justified, sometimes even required, to teach through violence. Children are instructed to understand their submission to pain as a form of love.
So a couple of weeks ago, I was picking up an online order from a food cart in Portland. And as I waited my turn, I slowly became aware of the conversation that the man operating the cart was having with the customer in front of me. It went like this. And then when those people from Seattle come down here and they hand out clean needles and tourniquets and alcohol swabs to all those junkies, you can imagine what it's like around here for a few days. Customer, why would they do that? Cartier, to make it safer. To make it safer for them to use drugs. It's ridiculous. I can't believe it's allowed. By the time it was my turn, I was physically shaking. And if we hadn't already paid for our order, I would have found something else for us to have for dinner. After collecting my bag, I said to the man behind the counter, you know, harm reduction prevents needless death. And then I walked away. In saying, I wish these people didn't have access to safe injection supplies, what that man and his customer were actually saying, whether they had fully thought it through or not, was, my neighbors who use drugs deserve to die. US culture has been so infected with this idea of substitutionary atonement, with a theology that sanctifies punishment for wrongdoing, that instead of looking at someone who is without a home, who is fighting addiction, instead of looking at that person and thinking, what does this struggling sibling of mine need to have a better life? It is acceptable, even encouraged, to think instead, I don't like their behavior, so rather than help them do better, I want them punished, even unto death. Help in this worldview is a reward only given to the worthy. Never mind that if you give someone a place to live, if someone develops relationships with harm reduction workers, these are things that can help folks get out of active addiction. But no, they did a bad thing, so we have to punish them. And we absolutely can't reward their behavior by giving them help. This flat-out cruelty should be shocking to our humanity. Instead, it's casual conversation at the food cart. This is why I am a Universalist, beloveds. A world with punishment instead of love at the center is a world I cannot be reconciled to. The divine of my understanding weeps at the harm humans cause. It is the divine will that love is at the center, not that harm be met with more harm. We Unitarian Universalists have long insisted on the inherent dignity and worthiness of every human being. And while it is sometimes hard for me as a human to look at someone who has done or is doing real terrible harm and believe in that person's worthiness and dignity, still I know it is the call of my faith to remember that worthiness and to look in their eyes and see reflected there both myself and the divine of my own understanding looking right back at me. If we truly believe, as we say we do, that everyone has dignity and worthiness, I have to look into the face of someone who has done horrible things and not seek further debasement of that person who has already strayed so far from their own humanity. But instead, I want to see them reunited with their human dignity by striving to help them end their harmful actions toward themselves and others. On a much smaller, lower stakes scale, that's why we have a covenant of right relations here at Saltwater that names how we want to be together, openly acknowledges that we will sometimes miss the mark, and offers ways to return to right relationship when this happens. We want to help people find their way back into right relationship when they cause or experience harm. And I'm going to argue that this is actually a more biblical understanding of how to approach wrongdoing and harm than this substitutionary atonement nonsense that Anselm came up with over 1,000 years after Jesus lived and died. In his book, Lives of Unforgetting, What We Lose in Translation When We Read the Bible, Stan Latore writes, quote, "Let's talk about sin. Sin is an English word we have used to translate various separate, though related concepts in the Bible. There is hata, to miss the mark, when a spearman or archer fails to strike a target, and hamartia, which is the Greek version of hata. There is avon, which means both injustice and the penalty for it. We sometimes translate this in English as iniquity, or an older variation on the English word inequity. And then there is pesha, oath-breaking. These are all activities we have at times translated as sin, to miss the mark or fall short, to commit an injustice, to transgress a covenant, or break a promise. Latore continues, we have wrongly come to regard the soul as having two binary states, sinful and sinless. It's an unbiblical idea, and I'm hard-pressed to come up with a situation in which such an idea might prove useful rather than destructive. Ironically, this idea takes us to a place where sin becomes regarded not as an action that has consequences, but instead a state which people either exist or don't. End quote. At a ministers' conference I attended sometime in the past couple years, the speaker introduced us to the good-bad shuffle. You may have heard me speak of this before. Let me show you how this works. So, there's a line here, okay? And all the good things are on that side of the line. And all the bad things are on this side of the line. And what this teacher helped me realize was that we spend an inordinate amount of time and energy deciding which side of the line we're on. And how we treat ourselves is so influenced by where we land. Let me give you an example. So, I got all that paperwork taken care of. I'm such a good person. I deserve a treat. I'm going to the coffee shop. I got the coffee that was really, really fatty and sugary, and I'm such a bad person. I don't deserve dessert at all tonight. I'm such a good person. I let that person merge into traffic, and they didn't have to turn in the only lane. But now I forgot a meeting I was supposed to be at 15 minutes ago. I'm such a bad person. Do you see this dance, this shuffle? And how it is so embedded into our psyches by commonplace parenting practices. So often, and I did this too as a parent, okay? We teach children by rewarding behavior we like and punishing behavior we don't. Children then learn to calculate what will get them rewarded and what will get them punished. They learn to display the good behaviors and hide the bad ones, eventually developing an internal voice that doles out judgments of good or bad and resulting rewards and punishments without even needing that external reinforcement. This is what I mean when I say the warden within. My friends, I want to urge you that when these thoughts arise in you, I'm so bad, I don't deserve, I'm so good, I do deserve, interrupt these thoughts. You're not good because you did a good thing. You're not bad because you did a bad thing. You are a human who does good things and bad things, a human with inherent worthiness and dignity. When your inner warden tries to tell you otherwise, I want to encourage you to notice and stop them in their tracks by reminding yourself, hey, doing good doesn't make me good. Doing bad doesn't make me bad. This is especially important for some of us who, for whatever reason, aren't able to do the behaviors deemed good all the time. If a child is unable to manage these standard good behaviors because of a disability, or because of trauma they have experienced, or maybe because they aren't able to get their basic needs met due to poverty, those kids may be punished and learn that they are bad for reasons that are inherent to who they are or entirely beyond their control, or both. These kids I'm describing don't need punishment because they're behaving badly. They need help to identify and remedy the root causes of that behavior. The same is true of the unhoused person addicted to meth who is urinating in public on the street in front of the food cart. If these people are missing the mark, like an archer, what they need is coaching in how to make a more accurate shot, not to be punished because they missed. If you beat the archer for not making that shot, what chance does their broken body have to shoot accurately the next time they try? This original biblical recognition that most wrongdoing is about having missed the mark, committing an injustice rather than about a person being inherently bad, this truth got lost somewhere along the way, thanks to Anselm and Calvin and so many more. Our Universalist heritage puts us more in line with Anselm's critic Abelard. God is better than a demand for retribution. Christian Universalism says that God is essentially loving, and all souls that pass out of this life will be reunited with that love, not just the chosen or the worthy few. Now, many of us Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists, our faith has grown beyond its Christian origins. So some of us are less concerned about the hereafter than we are about the here and now. And so that Universalist eschatology that says when we die, God condemns no one to eternal punishment, that no one can be separated from divine love, this is where we find the call to put love at the center. That call asks us to figure out what a love-centered society would look like and then do that thing in every aspect of our lives, in our own minds and hearts, in the way we are together in community, in the ways we parent our children, and the way we deal with harm as a society. And my friends, our carceral system is neither putting love at the center, nor is it a place where people find redress of harm. Unitarian Universalists are right now in the midst of a multi-year reflection on abolition as an issue in need of our study and action. We are led in this work by the Church of the Larger Fellowship, or the CLF, an all-online UU community that includes among its members hundreds of incarcerated Unitarian Universalists. Some of you participated in sending holiday greetings to some of them last winter season, and I hope we can do that again this year. CLF knows the harms of the prison industrial complex intimately through the lived experience of their incarcerated members, and they define the issue this way, quote, "Abolition is a holistic approach to systemic social change that includes, but is not limited to, the abolition of slavery, replacing systems and cultures of violence, coercion, and control with transformative justice and relational practices, and dismantling the prison industrial complex as we know it. It requires the transformation of our society and the replacement of theologies of retributive justice and violence," end quote. It's easy to talk theoretically about harm and punishment and say that we need different systems, but what happens when we're personally confronted with harm? What happens when someone has shown that in the context of our society, they can't not cause harm? Right now, the only option we have is to lock them away. And sure, this can protect society from that person's harm for a time, but it doesn't in any way change the person who harmed for the better, to help them become someone who doesn't harm any longer. Instead, it turns the harm onto them as they are subjected to confinement, forced labor, and separation from community. I've sat with a mom whose abusive ex had just gotten out of prison. And although she was one of the few survivors of domestic violence I know for whom justice was ostensibly served, even though the system worked the way it was supposed to in this case, his release from prison left her terrified. His harm was not addressed by the systems that we have. In Spokane, we learned that the man who confessed to starting one of the terribly destructive fires that tore through our state this month also confessed to starting dozens more fires, and he was known as a person of interest to police around fires in the area last year. Our system did not have the tools to transform his harmful behavior. Instead, the system had to wait until that harm was on a large enough scale and so clearly connected to this man that now we can lock him away forever to keep him from causing more harm. But what if there had been an intervention that could have helped transform his harmful behavior before it produced even greater harm? But if such an intervention existed, would we be inclined to refuse it to such a person because we see him as someone who is unworthy of our help? I saw a piece of commentary recently around a very public trial of a mom who did a truly horrible thing during what her defense maintains was a psychotic episode. The mental health coach Heather B., commenting on this tragedy, wrote, "If your definition of justice requires you to enjoy watching another human being suffer, I think we need to ask whether what you're seeking is actually justice or simply punishment." My friends, I want to ask you to take that question to your heart. Because what we're doing now to address harm, it isn't working. It's time for us to imagine better ways. May all who have experienced harm experience healing from that harm. May all who have caused harm experience healing such that they do not repeat that harm. Amen. Ashe. So may it be.